My name's Matt Jones. I'm the content platform specialist at Cuba, and I'm joined by Andy Precious, who's our account director. And we're going to be talking. We're going to be talking in a bit about replatforming. But first of all, I'll just give you a little bit of background about Stack Bite Size. So, what is it? It's an event that we've been running for some time now, and it's a 15-minute presentation on subjects around web technology, followed by a 15-minute Q&A. So that's your opportunity to quiz us on some of those burning questions you might have. So without further ado, the subject matter of this presentation is replatform, rebuild, or replace, and how that affects your website strategy. So first of all, I'm going to start by talking about what the difference between those various options are. So to do this, I've used the analogy of a car. So with a replatform, it's essentially keeping the body shell of the car, but replacing the mechanicals underneath. So putting in a new engine, new brakes, etc. And in terms of a website, this means keeping front end, or at least wise the majority of front ends, but replacing the CMS that's behind that. Now, it's not always that straightforward. Often it depends very much on the kind of content platform that you're already on and what you're migrating to. But essentially, that's the basis of a replatform. We've then got a rebuild, and as the name suggests, it means rebuilding the entire website. So it's a kind of ground up replacement of everything. It's looking at not just the CMS that's behind it, but the front end framework, and in some cases, it might involve a design refresh at the end of the day as well, but that's not a sort of full rescope of the website. And that takes us on to the next option, which is to replace. And to use the car analogy again, it's like getting down to the drawing board and planning out your new vehicle. So it's in the case of a website, it's the discovery process, it's the user research, the stakeholder research. All of the kind of process that's involved in the kind of detailed discovery, and that then leads into obviously the rebuild of it. So what are some of the trigger points for replatforming? Well, the obvious one is that you've outgrown your current platform, and I think that's kind of inevitable if you're considering a replatform. And that might be down to a number of different factors. It might be lack of functionality. Your marketing team are getting frustrated. They can't do put in place landing pages, or a microsite, or whatever those requirements are, and they're just not getting from that platform what they need. Another area might be poor experience on mobile or other devices, such as tablet, etc. If it's an older platform, it's not necessarily going to offer the same flexibility as the more modern platforms, and we'll come on to talk about a little bit more of that in a moment. The other one is obviously that the CMS might have reached the end of its life, but the content's still relevant. You might have invested quite a lot in your website. I'm sure you have, and the user journeys, the conversion is actually working quite well, but it's the technology behind the scenes that's struggling. And that might be in the form that it's costly to maintain. You're spending a lot on maintenance. It's constantly requiring patches, or you might even be looking at major upgrades and obviously costs associated with these. Another trigger point might be the tech's falling behind and it's no longer supported by your platform vendor. We see this quite a lot when we inherit websites from other agencies. It's not unusual to find a website that's, say, on version 8 of a particular content platform, and the latest version is, say, a version 12. So there's 4 versions in between that require an upgrade, and that's not a simple process. And the problems with that is, things like security issues. If your older versions aren't supported, you're not getting those patches. As a consequence of that, there's a heavy reliance on your agency partner. So you're spending more, but you're not necessarily getting the benefits of that expenditure. So why replatform rather than rebuild? Well, as mentioned, the existing front end might be performing very well, so there's no need to do that. You don't want to embark on that if it's not necessary. The other reason might be the time to implement. Obviously, it's a lot quicker to replatform and rebuild because you're not going through all of that process of a complete redesign and planning around that. And then finally, budgets. It's obviously less of an investment to re-platform because of that. There's less work involved. So I'm just going to talk about some of the benefits around this. One of the benefits depend really on the type of platform that you're looking at, i.e., what platform you're on now, what you're migrating to. There is a huge choice available, and it's probably never been more complicated than it is right now. We're finding this with clients, and we've actually put together a specific process to help clients through this decision-making process. You've got, solutions like digital experience platforms. They're the kind of do-it-all marketing integrated within that platform. You've got more traditional CMSs like WordPress and Bracco, and then you've got the headless solutions. And the headless solutions are kind of the newer solutions out there that you've probably heard about them. In fact, we've done a webinar on headless specifically, and they offer quite a few advantages. They're not always the right choice, but they certainly offer some advantages over the traditional CMS platforms. One of those advantages might be omni-channel delivery. So if you're looking to deliver across multiple devices, such as smart devices, Alexa, that type of voice devices, etc., that can be a real advantage. Another advantage is security. By re-platforming, you can fix issues with legacy systems. And then just coming back to headless, this is, again, it's particularly true of headless because the security is managed by the vendor on the fly. So it's a SaaS-based model, software service-based model. So it means that those fixes are constantly being done rather than relying on, say, a patch to come out, and then that might be 3 months after the security threat has been identified. You've then got to get that scheduled in with your agency to get that fixed. Another benefit is obviously the ability to scale up. And I think this is one sort of tip, is to think about, and obviously not what you need now or even next year, but plan ahead. CMS platforms are starting to last a lot longer because of the way the technology has evolved. So whereas maybe 10 years ago your CMS platform might have lasted 3 or 4 years, now we're seeing 5 to 7 years as not unusual at all for a client to stay on a software platform for 7 years and even longer. The key is picking the right platform. We also touched on this speed to market. So obviously re-platform is a much quicker solution than a full rebuild, and it's a case of kind of concentrating on the tech rather than the other factors. So that's a big benefit. And then finally, integration. I don't think there's a website or a web platform that we've built in the last 3 or 4 years I can think of that hasn't involved some degree of integration. It's almost essential for every website now to have some levels of integration, and in some cases it can be quite significant. So it's not just your CRM, it might be your product information management system or SAP-based system. There's an awful lot of options out there, and moving to a more modern system, particularly headless, can give you a lot of advantages there. Right, I'm now going to hand over to Andy, who's going to run you through a few lessons learned from working with our clients.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So the first one that we've got here, if you can just nip to the next slide, please, Matt, is not underestimating the content. So it's my opinion that this sort of makes or breaks any replatforming project. And it might seem like something that you can just bolt on, take your content across as is. But invariably, the architecture will be different from one platform to another. And I think there's an idea really that some people think that it's just sort of copy and paste what you have. It's really crucial that you get this right with your agency and understand the level of effort involved across everyone that's going to be working on the site and taking that forward. And as I say, it's not really just taking across what you have. We recommend doing data modeling and some like content normalization, which is basically just documenting, how it's structured, where it's stored, how it can be exported, and how much of that can be automated as well. So I guess why this is such a big topic is not just in terms of effort involved, but actually it forms the scope of pretty much the replatforming project itself. I.e. what will come across in that project into the new platform. We've worked with a large UK airport in a replatforming project recently, and content has been central to this whole approach, really. So the way we approached that was to conduct a MOSCO, must have, should have, could have, won't have evaluation, specifically on the content. And what that looked at was how everything was structured in the CMS currently, what must come across, and also how that is mapped then against the sort of new architecture to make it fit. And as I say, that essentially from our side as an agency forms that scope of work and essentially what we can cost against and work with. But also as a client, I think it really helps. That exercise really helps solidify and give some reassurance that everything will be in place once it's across there. And as I say, helps visualize, I suppose, what will come across and how it will come across. But again, I think there is that misconception that you can sort of easily export, you just do a scrape or, a database dump from your current site of the content. And that's, in our experience, not often very true. The current CMS often is the bottleneck in that. Obviously, if you've got procured a new platform, there won't be anything in there until you start inputting the data. But the challenge really is getting the data out of your current CMS and all that content and where it's sat. So we often find that for structured data, things like blogs and all that kind of stuff, it's typically easier because everything follows the same format. But when you start thinking about all the sort of WYSIWYG text editors and inline content and things like that, it becomes difficult, I suppose, for the systems to export that and by proxy your agency to do that for you in getting that data out. For example, if you've got a widget that can be placed sort of anywhere on your site, how does the system know where that should be and where that content should then be mapped to? So I think this really means that there's always naturally a manual effort in that process, and not to underestimate that. Through the best will in the world, trust me, we'd love to be able to just export things from the CMS for either ourselves or the client to start inputting. But often there's a limitation around that. So I think that all of this really culminates in sort of a bit of a realization, I think, for these projects where it isn't just, oh, we've got the content's not changing, we're moving it across as is. That's fine, but there is actually a lot of work involved in doing that and bringing it across. So yeah, I think that's really something that you should tackle straight away. You can't really start thinking about your content too soon with any replatforming. Okay, I think the second one, Matt, is managing the can we just conversations. So this is all around scope creep. You'll have chosen to go down a replatforming project for a specific reason, compared to sort of a rebuild and design from scratch. And I think it's really important to understand that and understand the sort of vision and the boundaries that imposes compared to sort of a carte blanche redesign. And I think retaining control of this is really the key to success. I think it's always tempting to start to sort of, whilst we're doing this bit, can we just change that? And those can we just conversations start to come thick and fast. And that's where costs and timings can often spiral. So of course, some level of change is inevitable. That's fine. Accommodating some level is expected, I suppose, particularly with front end and things like that, where it's easy to see and sort of everyone has an opinion. So that's fairly normal. But I suppose the difference with replatforming projects is you need to retain that control and not let things start to run away. Not only because obviously costs spiral, but as we've just said previously around content, once you've done all of that data modeling and all that hard work in defining that, then that sort of forms the roadmap, and deviating from that can often cause complications, and ultimately will undermine the sort of integrity of what you're trying to achieve. And I think when you begin making changes, some may be natural and have to be accommodated, but it's just being aware of where does that end. You know, you are doing a replatforming over a rebuild for a specific reason often. So you don't want to turn around, you know, halfway through or towards the end and say, wow, this isn't really what we set out to achieve. And you have this sort of halfway house between you know, something that's a replatform versus sort of a brand new rebuild. I guess an example that we've come across of this is when we've worked with a large international financial services firm, and we'd actually discussed with them prior to replatforming the option of actually redesigning from scratch and sort of rebuilding to replace the website entirely. There was some considerations there in terms of budget and times that didn't allow for that. So it was basically the scope to take across exactly what we have as is. And I think with replatforming, whenever you are moving from one system to another, there's naturally a sort of square peg, round hole situation. And that's even at the best of times if you're taking things across exactly as is. So keeping that goal sort of pure, keep things simpler for everyone involved. Because the more changes you make, the sort of squarer that peg becomes and the rounder the hole becomes, and it becomes a lot more hard work just to achieve what you set out to do. And with this particular client, there was a lot of different stakeholders involved from different departments, and those can we just conversations were really starting to come quickly. So we found that one change sort of necessitated another, and actually if we're doing that, then that knocks on here, and soon we had to step back and say, look, we're happy to talk about some change here, but actually this is undermining the sort of integrity of what we're trying to do with the replatform. And we'd agreed basically to sort of simplify the scope again and keep it quite pure. Having said all that, you know, whilst I've just advocated for replatforming and keeping things streamlined and fixated on just, you know, the technology itself, I think one of the key things that we need to do here is understand the sort of senior stakeholder expectation, I suppose you'd call it, around what replatforming is, because what you need is buy-in from those higher ups, if you like, because what you don't want to do is turn around after, you know, weeks or months of replatforming and then go, oh, is that it? You know, it's the same as what we had. And I think that's really important to manage that sort of expectation and potential disappointment, because you really have to be clear that a replatform just with no front-end changes is pretty much purely a performance or security or integration-based conversation, and delivering the same website again might be a little bit underwhelming for some of those people unless they're brought up along the way with it. So yeah, okay. I think the third one is that we've had as a lesson learned is really about doing your homework. And I think this is, you know, absolutely stating the obvious, but choosing the right platform really does matter. As I say, it goes without saying, but the reason I mention that really is because it's probably harder to choose one than you would think. You need to be absolutely certain that it's going to do what you want. And as Matt said, you know, not just now, but in the future. And I think this point really is around not just getting sort of sucked in by the marketing and the sort of sales spiel. And I think when you are trying to evaluate this yourself as a project sponsor and as a client, it's difficult to see the wood for the trees. And yeah, often there's a lot of promises made on those websites and in that sales material that might actually not be too relevant for what you're trying to achieve. So I think this is really about being critical, get a demo, make sure that you're asking questions. And in order to do that, you really have to be sure on what that baseline criteria is. You need to really be able to score and evaluate these platforms on a level playing field. So it's about getting that knowledge, whether you're doing your own research or you're partnering with an agency, or even going through a process to select a platform with your partner agency. You really can't do enough homework. So again, doing things like a Moscow requirements as a set of criteria, or better yet, doing actually sort of a light platform discovery with your agency will pay dividends, because this is the jumping off point now for the future of your platform for years to come, longer and longer, again, as Matt alluded to. So it might even be the best part of a decade that you're going to be working with this system for. So I think some key things to think about when you are evaluating is obviously, what does it do that your current site doesn't? There's an ease of administration element. A lot of CMSs are very similar and feel and look very similar, and they do very similar things. But we're starting to see that diversifying now, and especially with things like headless, the left panel for all your page tree and everything is kind of not how that works. So it isn't just a given that it should be easy to use, because actually it could be structured in a way that you're not currently used to. Security, obviously, is there any security criteria? That might even be why you've begun to this process in the first place. There's a security concern, you need to replatform. And I think scalability is probably a massive one there. Does it fit within your ecosystem? Does it work with your integrations? Is it going to facilitate what you need it to do into the future? But even after all that, it's still very difficult to evaluate. So I'd advocate getting some help with that. As I say, speak to your agency. We have a selection process that is sort of tried and tested over the years. And it's trying to be sort of agnostic. You might have a preferred, but don't get set in your ways, and be open-minded and be critical. And yeah, that'll help you evaluate and see what you need to do moving forward. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Andy. I'm going to wrap up really quickly, because I've noticed we've run a little bit over our 15. So conclusions and takeaways. So first of all, look out for those signs that you need to replatform. We've talked about some of those already, the tech issues, the security issues, the lack of functionality. Those are things to look out for. Consider the benefits carefully and weigh those up before you actually jump into committing to this and making what is essentially a very big investment. And I think your agency hopefully has a similar process to ourselves, which is a very thorough process for actually evaluating the platforms before actually committing. And then just finally, as Andy's really spent quite a lot of time talking about, don't underestimate what's involved. Speak to your agency. There's a lot to do on your side as well as the agency side. Well, that concludes it. Thank you very much. We've run a bit over, but if you've got some questions, we'd love to hear from you. I'm just going to stop sharing. Do we have any questions coming in? We've got one that was sent in earlier. How do you determine if headless CMS is the right choice for your business during replatforming? That's a good question. I think it comes back to what we were saying earlier about doing your homework and working closely with your agency to make that evaluation. So, we've kind of touched on headless a bit in this presentation. We've actually done a separate stat bite size just on that. it's probably not time to kind of get into the full ins and outs of benefits of headless, etc. right now. But I think it's certainly it's a question of following a thorough process on that and making sure that you understand what the benefits and drawbacks, because there are some drawbacks as well with headless, are before you make that commitment. It's the obvious benefits are things like omni-channel delivery, the fact that it's a SaaS-based model, so you've got all the benefits of SaaS. So yeah, as I say, I think it's a difficult one to get into in a few minutes, but I think if anyone wants to talk to us about that in more detail, we're happy to talk about that after the presentation. Looks like we've just
see we've got a couple. Johnny, thanks for your question around specific industries. I'm not sure that there are specific industries that would benefit from replatforming rather than sort of a rebuild. To me, it's probably more that there are particular industries that probably have that trigger point earlier. For example, financial services, we work with several airports and things like that. And I think when clients have IT teams who run regular pen tests or have security experts in house and things like that, they're very much on the pulse with the platform and making sure it's up to date, and if it comes to end of life and all that kind of stuff. So really, it's not maybe industry specific necessarily, because everyone could benefit from a replatform over a redesign or over a rebuild and things like that. It's probably just that some industries are probably it's easier to get to those trigger points and identify them, I suppose. I don't know if you've got anything to add there, Matt.
No, I think that sums up pretty well, Andy. I've noticed we've got a couple more that have come in actually, so we're short on time, so I think we'll get through these quickly, as quick as we can. So Mariles, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Apologies if not. Hello, would you recommend a site rather than WordPress to move a small business client to? Would you like more? Who would like more autonomy of their website? Website currently built in WordPress. WordPress is it's by far the most popular CMS platform out there, and for good reason. It's very capable. It does have certain drawbacks by its nature because of the way it's developed with all the plugins. There are security vulnerabilities, and that's one of its sort of big drawbacks. It's one of the reasons that we don't always recommend it. As an alternative, I think certainly within the CMS platforms that we offer, I think Umbraco is the CMS of choice because it's also open source, but it has it has a better history with security. Its functionality is very capable, and it's known as the friendly CMS, and rightly so. It's a very easy CMS platform to learn, and within an hour you can be up and running on that without any problems at all. Whereas some of the other CMSs, particularly the sort of digital experience platforms, you might be looking at a day's worth of training and then still not be able to work your way around that. So it's difficult without actually knowing your full your brief and details, but I would say Umbraco would be the one that we would probably put forward.
Going around, does replatforming have any cost reduction benefits? Yes, I suppose is the short answer for that, but also a caveat of it depends. When you are looking at replatforming, you are inherently focusing in on the technology, and the front end design and things is retained as is. So that whole sort of concept, wireframing, design, UX piece is essentially saved. The brief is very clear on it should look and behave and feel exactly as it does now. So you sort of skip that chunk of the project in its entirety. But I think there is it is still a warranted step to consider in a replatforming, because there will likely still be a few things that will need to be considered in the design. Yes, we're not going to be necessarily producing wireframes and prototypes and brand new designs for everyone to sort of have an opinion on. So it focuses it that way. But I think it's wise to still leave some allocation in your budget to sort of have some of those discussions, whether or not they're taken forward into a full design or not.
Great, thanks, Danny. I think that covers the questions, and I think unfortunately we've run out of time. So thanks everyone for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the session and got a lot out of it. There's obviously a lot more to replatforming and platforms in general that we could go into. We could talk for hours about this subject if we had the time. What I would say is that we offer a consultancy service around replatforming, which is a 5-stage process, which we spent quite a lot of time developing. We offer that to clients and prospects. So if you're interested in that, please message either Andy or myself on LinkedIn, or contact us via the Cuba website. Anyway, just to say, thanks for joining us, and look forward to seeing you at the next one.